Hello, my name is Andrew, and I wanted to make a video describing some information about the recent NetRunnerDB deck scraping situation and how it might have happened in detail from a technical perspective, and just help people understand it better from a purely technical perspective. In the Facebook group, I got in some discussions with people that I think my tone wasn't very sensitive, and I'm sorry about that. My perspective on this is I think scraping the decks and trying to use them to gain any sort of competitive advantage was wrong. Many of the people who were involved in it have apologized. Some independent groups or people who were doing it who weren't connected to the first group have also come out and said they were doing something along these lines and apologized for doing it. Uh, I wasn't affected by it, so whatever is the appropriate way to gain the community's trust back is really between the people who did it and I think especially the people that they affected. So I'm gonna not comment on that. But I did feel like in the discussion there was uh, some confusion around what actually happened and what level of effort would have been required to do it. And I also thought this would just be an interesting way to get people some information about how this type of thing can be done pretty easily in any modern scripting language, and understanding it better, and also having some knowledge about how things could be made better in the future. That hopefully when we're using NetRunnerDB a year from now, this isn't something that we have to worry about from just being technically possible. And I'm sure there are other websites that would have similar potential vulnerabilities, and so maybe you'll be a little bit of a better protected internet user. So anyway, if this doesn't sound interesting to you, then feel free to tune out. But if it sounds interesting, then I'll do my best to explain what's going on. So this is a post on the StimHack forum describing the situation from the perspective of, hey, if you don't want people to get your information, then make sure that you don't check this box in your NetRunnerDB account. Great. That's totally accurate. If you want to make sure that if you don't have this box checked, then people should not be able to view your deck lists that are not published, and that's really, really useful information. So that's pretty simple there. Okay, so what exactly happens here? So I want to go through. I found this cool Firefox plugin called multi-account containers. I also set up a development instance of NetRunnerDB. So the demo I'm giving is not using real NetRunnerDB. It is using a fake local instance of NetRunnerDB that only has data that I've added to it. So just don't freak out. This is not anybody else's data. So I've set up 3 accounts, test 1, test 2, test 3, and this cool little Firefox extension lets me have them each logged in a separate tab. So and they're color coded. So test 1 has it's green because they have a shaper deck. That's great. And they, in their account, we're going to leave their account not having that box checked. That's the default, is to not have that box checked. So we're just going to leave it that way. But test 2 and test 3, we are going to edit their accounts to, we'll just change the color while we're at it. But we're going to change their accounts to have that box checked. Share your decks. And we'll do it here too. Okay. So they each have only one deck because that was easy to do. Now, the nature of the situation is this. If you click on one of your decks on the view link, you get this URL. This one ends in /deck/view slash a number. And people noticed that if they start to play around with putting different numbers in here, so this is still from the test one account. Right now I'm looking at a deck that is owned by test one. But if I put a different number in here, I end up seeing a deck made by somebody else. Now, previously, the author information would also be shown here. That's no longer the case. Alciende changed that, so now the author is not shown here. But in any case, I'm viewing a deck. The intended use case here, I think everybody agrees, is that you would be able to check that box, and then you could take a link to your deck. Again, this is test one's deck. Test one can take this URL link, copy it, paste it into a message to a friend. Their friend can then view the deck. Great. But because the way this works is numbers that are incremented by 1 for each new deck that's created, a couple interesting things happen. So one interesting thing is that I know I have a range of possible numbers that would make sense, right? If I know that if I create a new deck and it gets the next available number, then I know that there aren't any decks past that unless people create new decks. It also means if I create a deck on Tuesday, then decks created after that, like for example on Wednesday, are going to have numbers that are close to the one I created and a little bit higher. So by doing that, you could figure out, you could specifically look for decks that were created in a particular time range. Assume you had one to start with, then you could go and I also want to point out, if you have unlimited time, you can just start at 1 and scrape up. Go check every URL forever. I checked 7, now I'll check 8. I can see that. And I could just go on forever looking for decks until I find where there isn't one yet. So that's the nature of what happened. Now, my understanding is that some people were just doing this. They were using a browser and they were putting different numbers in and seeing what came up. And I don't know how sophisticated they got about that, whether they were using the time element of it, but that was happening. Now, one thing I want to point out before we go any farther is that if I'm over here in test 2, I look at my deck, and I go try to look. Of course, I'll be able to look at 8 because that one the account was set to public. But if I try to look at 6, it shouldn't work. In real Netrunnerdb, you wouldn't get this fancy looking page, but you would just get an error saying we couldn't get that for you. So, whereas the same URL on the test 1 account will absolutely work because it has permission to view it. So, if you don't have that box checked, your data is safe as far as I know. So it's just an interesting thing I wanted to point out. Okay, so let's say that I have this information. I understand how this works, and I want to do some sophisticated snooping and try to actually gather some useful information. Well, I'm going to harness computers to my advantage. I'm going to try to use robots to take away some of the work from me. That's great. Just to full disclosure here, I work with Python a lot. I've done URL grabbing before in Python, but it was a long time ago, and I'm not super up to date on it. Like it's not something that comes really naturally to me. At work, we have a different, more complex interface for getting data from different sources, so I'm used to using that and not just scraping URLs. But anyway, so I have the background, but I'm not super fast at it. I have a page open here to reference an example because um, that's half of programming is Googling stuff. And then the other thing, well, I guess that's basically it. We'll kind of see as we go. So I am going to check down here and look at the API explanation here. And basically, I should be able to go to replace part of the URL with API 2.0. Actually, let's open this here so we can look at it. API 2.0 public. That didn't work. Nope, not that. Got it. So, API 2.0 public deck. We don't have this view thing here. Oop. API 2.0 deck 6. Public. Right, so this one we get deck not shared. That makes sense because we're going through the public API. If I go to 7 though, then I see it. So this is JSON. It's just a structured data format. So it's pretty simple. We have a list of maps, and each map here. So this map entry ID 7, that's the deck ID. We have some information about when it was created, the name of it. So previously, the author would show up here as well, and that's not true anymore. Same as with the web view. But then I have a list of cards by code and their quantity, right? So, so this is this API URL. Okay, so now let's start playing around with this in Python. And just gonna record that there. And again, using my documentation here, import urllib3 http equals urllib3.poolmanager. Response equals http.request. Get just means that this is normally how you get a web page. When you put something in your browser, in the browser bar and hit enter, your browser sends a get request. When you like upload a form, that's a post request. That's what get means. So I'm just throwing a 7 on the end of that string. I should get a response. URL base. Okay, response looks like that. Response dot data. That's what JSON looks like. So I'm going to import JSON. D equals JSON dot loads response dot data. Yeah, because that did not work because it is a bytes, which is old school. That's funny. I thought URL-lib did not do this anymore, but this shows you how infrequently I actually do this. Okay, if I were doing Python 2, this would just work. In Python 3, we'll need to do dot. Let's look this up. Oh, I haven't been showing my Python. Haha. I am doing this wrong in OBS. I'll fix that. Okay. So let's see. We'll look up Python 3 bytes to string. I think we'll just need to do a Unicode dot. Oh yeah, decode. Okay. So response. Oh yeah. Let me fix the input here so we can see the Python window capture bash. Great. Okay. How do I choose which one you see? Oh, cool. Okay, that's easy. All right. So let's back up here. Let's. I'm going to make this bigger too, because this is crazy. Let's do font. Let's make it 36 maybe. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to set base URL base. Aha. URL base equals, and again, this is the URL that the basic URL that we got without the number at the end. And then we're going to import URL lib 3, HTTP equals a pool manager. We're going to say request equals http.request get. I explained that earlier. URL base plus 7. Request.data looks like that. That is, again, what JSON looks like. We're going to say request.data.encode UTF-8 decode. Right, decode. Okay, and then we're going to say import JSON, d equals JSON.loads, request.data.decode UTF-8. So JSON.loads turns that JSON string up here into a Python dictionary object. And so now we have the data, and that should have lots of nice information there. So theoretically, like right now, oh right, number 0. Right, we can get the name of it. Again, the author would be here previously, but it's not anymore. So that's a good thing that Alciende did temporarily. Although I imagine in the future when there's like a little more robust process around this, it would actually be really cool to put the name back in, because it would be nice to see it. It's just disabled right now because it was enabling filtering on it. So let's say I want to have, I'm going to make a function. Let's get my history up here. Okay. I want to make a function that is like get list by ID. Deck ID. Sorry, I'll say get deck by ID. And it's going to say request equals hp.request get URL base plus string deck ID. And it's going to then data equals json.loads request dot data dot decode UTF-8 and return data return that one deck list. So deck equals get deck by ID 8. We'll try a different one here. And we got the other one, that is the CTM deck. And we'll check out its name. Got it. So now if I wanted to do something where I start at a certain number and go up from there, I'm going to make a new function that's get decks from offset, and we're going to have a start and this is terrible naming, but a length, and we'll say length defaults to 100. So what this is going to do, the goal of this function is going to be to start from a certain number and then get all the decks, starting with that, going up. So deck IDs equals list range start start plus length. Dex equals get deck by ID num for num in deck IDs. Return decks. So if I want to get, I'm actually going to just get 2 because that's all we have. But dex equals get dex from offset 7 2. We're going to start at 7 and we want 2. So now I have 2 decks. The first one and the second one. And that's pretty easy. And I could just, start, given any start number, however many I want, go ahead and scrape them. Probably I would need to add in real life some better error handling. But that's super easy. I mean, really, we would just need to say let's see, we just replace this. Def get dex from offset start length deck IDs equals list range start plus dex length, that's going to be the same. And then dex equals an empty list for num in deck IDs. Try get deck by ID num dex.append get deck by ID num except do nothing. And now if we do this, yeah, this will have 2 in it instead of 3, but it just silently ignores that the other thing broke. So at this point we have dex, and then now if I want to do filtering, I can just say filter dex. Is this the right? Let's see. List filter dex. There's nicer ways to do this, but Geist in x name should work. Oh, see, I had it backwards. That's terrible. Right. So filter dex equals this, and when filter dex, so we filtered. Now, this was done by the deck name, but we could also have done it based on the author name or whatever, and we would have we could filter by that. So at this point, and we could even say def. What's our history here? Def get filtered dex from offset, and we need to have the start, the length, and the filter function, and we want to say return list filter, well, we'll say dex equals get dex from offset start length, and return list filter func dex. So now we can say dex equals get filter dex from offset 7 for prison in x dot lower. Oh, x name dot lower. Extra dot, that's terrible. Dex 0 name, right? So now we're filtering, right? So okay, what's the point of this? The point is that in not very much time, I got to a program that will start at a certain number and go up from there and get all the decks starting at that number up through, and try as many as I said in length, and then for ones that fail, whether because there's not something there or because someone's profile was not set to make those viewable by anyone, then it'll just ignore those and return only the ones it did find, and then it'll filter on whatever thing I want to filter it on. And I got there really pretty fast. So I guess I just want to show how easy it is to do that sort of thing. It doesn't take a lot of thought. Um, it's really easy. Okay, now let's go back to talking about um, what can be done about this. Um, so I've showed you how this could happen from an account settings perspective, how it could happen in a browser, how you could do it really easily with any scripting language, and easily add filters. That's just not difficult. And and from there, like if I want to generate URLs to view it in the browser, if I just want to, translate those IDs into card names, that's also very easy to do. So now I want to show you what, the conversation and what's going on as far as like changing this in the future. So what Alciende already did is two changes. One that just doesn't show the user ID and username in in that API version, and that's why in the JSON that we got there was no user ID or username. And the other doesn't show it in the web view unless you're the logged in user. So, if you're the owner, I guess it still doesn't show it. So this is, it would say this is private deck shared by, and then the username, it doesn't do that anymore. So those are changes that happened to NetRunnerDB that at least make it so you can't filter on user, which is something that some people were doing. There's a pull request open that's trying to add a hashing value to the URL. This is this will help. This will make it. This is a couple things. One of the things it fixes is where we could just increment the number by one every time, and easily figure out decks in a time range sorted by time. This makes that not really feasible. This also makes it so that it even like randomly guess that if you add hashes to the URL, then the chances that you're going to just plug something random in there and get a deck are pretty low. Like you would have to really try a lot to get any deck, and then you'd have no way of guaranteeing what time frame that deck would be in or anything like that. So this will make it much harder. This is an example of something called security through obscurity, and I'm not trying to bash this. I haven't written anything to help with this, so this is better than anything I've done. I do think in the long term it would be really cool to have just be able to say this deck is visible to these people, and put a list in there and have a simple URL that will work only for a few people. Short of that, even being able to going back to yeah, going back to the account settings, right now, if you want to do this with any deck, you have to do it with all of them, and that's not really ideal. Even if you could just do it per deck, that would be a major improvement. You could choose per deck what you want people to see or not see. Again, also, I think being able to do it for a group of people, I mean, I think it would be really cool to be able to even have a list of people that are allowed to edit a deck, and then you can do sort of collaborative deck building and testing, and I think that could be fun. That sounds complicated to add, so I'm not complaining that's not there or that people are going a different direction. I'm just that would be more of a true permissions uh, granular security approach versus the sort of like shotgun approach that's there now. And again, in my opinion, going with security through obscurity to try to make this okay is um, I don't know. It's um, I think it'll be better for people. It's not necessarily solving the root problem, but I think it'll be better for people. So I'm happy that someone's doing that. Um, yeah, and in the meantime, I personally on my account I share my decks. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about my decks, and that's fine. There are some people like Ben Nee, who I believe has just started publicly sharing all his deck view links. I really admire him for doing that. None of that takes away from the fact that you know um, taking advantage of the fact that people misunderstood this was wrong. So I'm not trying to argue for that, but I do really like that there are some cool people that I look up to that have while going while saying hey this wasn't cool have said I want to be open and share, and I just have a lot of respect for that. So um, that's that. Uh, Please let me know if you have questions about this. I'm happy to explain anything. This is really my first time doing this type of video, and I'm sure that there's a lot of room for improvement. I would be happy to hear it. Thank you if you made it all the way to the end here. Thank you for sticking around with me, and you are awesome. I will take the code that I wrote and throw it in like a public paste and share it in the description. So if you want to take a look at it, that would be, if you want to look at it more and play around with it, that would be fine with me. It's pretty simple stuff. So, anyway, thanks very much and happy net running.